Welcome to our next class. In this class, we will start looking at the 5 elements of the user experience and examine the first element, the strategy plane. To review, we talked about the user-centered design methodology as to being a relatively logical approach to developing a product, application, website, or multimedia, whatever you are doing. And we're looking at the approach which considers the user's need up front and throughout the design and development process. So I wanted you to just keep that in mind. So here we're looking at the 5 planes, the 5 elements of the user experience as a methodological approach. So we're looking first at the strategy. And this is where it all begins, and obviously this is, in my opinion, the most important phase. So from the right-hand side of this diagram, we look at the different planes. We have the strategy, scope, structure, and skeleton combined together, and the surface. So the strategy is where we plan everything. Next, we'll define what we're doing, then we'll design and develop, and then we'll further develop at the surface plane. But the actual planning, the organization, the identification of what we're doing and for whom we are doing it and for why we are doing is of paramount importance. Because if we don't understand what we're doing, it's very hard when we get to the design phase to actually have a consistent design that will be relatively useful and effective. So you might be working alone or on a team. You might have a time frame in which things need to happen. You might need some kind of approval or agreement by an individual or groups of individuals. You may have a product manager. But you always want to start off with some kind of proposal or statement of work that identifies essentially what you're doing or why and for whom. And this is where it all starts, at the strategy plane. So here's where we define what we are doing and why we are doing it. We start identifying, or at least brainstorming, the goals, objectives, and needs. We look at the company objectives and needs, the user needs, and the needs of the stakeholders. The stakeholders are other people who might have some kind of interest or involved in some way, either directly or non-directly, such as the board of directors. So you need to know the problem before you start creating a solution. And here again, I've said that it's just too easy to start opening up Photoshop or an HTML editor and start cranking away because we all like to be creative, but we really need to understand what we're doing and essentially what the problem is before we start creating the solution to it. So this is the strategy phase. Knowing what we want to accomplish for the organization, for the stakeholders, and for the users. So these 3 components are necessary throughout all 5 planes. We're constantly looking back to the strategy, understanding what are the needs of the organization, what are the needs of the stakeholder, what are the needs of the users, what are the goals of these 3 elements here. So at the strategy plane, we can look at it as being divided into 2 components. On the left, we have the objectives for the organization, the objectives for the stakeholders. On the right, we have the user, okay? The user's needs. Now, the needs can be somewhat determined from the product itself. The needs are also determined by the characteristics of the user. And this is what we'll be looking at in our next video for this week. So at the strategy phase is where we start to brainstorm ideas and assumptions. start getting your thoughts together, start tossing around ideas, and then we start narrowing down and defining what we're doing. Never take for granted that you think you know what someone has in their head. You need to actually make sure by putting it on paper. So here's where we define the goals and objectives, which are similar. What is the product? And here again, the product is a multimedia application, it's a website, it's a flyer, it could be a logo, it could be a video. What is the product supposed to accomplish? And we need to be explicit and specific, because the more we can narrow it down into specifications, the better we can develop that product. We also need to look at the business goals. There's always a reason for doing something, and the reason usually stems around money. It's usually to make money. Sometimes it's to save money, and by saving money, we're making more money. It also could be to save time, and when we save time, we also save money. It could be to make something a little bit more efficient, a little bit more useful. So think of that in respect to a lot of website applications. A lot of times we revise them for certain reasons, and one of them is to make them more efficient, but it's just not a general goal. We need to specify where we're making it efficient. Okay, so the understanding and narrowing down our objectives and requirements are very important. We need to identify the overall needs, the needs of the business and the stakeholders, and this will provide a direction for design. When it comes to actually laying out the design, these needs are going to be directing or influencing how the design looks and what's going to be on the home page, for example. So the needs, the goals, and objectives will help us to organize, prioritize, and evaluate the work and how we're approaching the work. At the strategy plane, we need to start learning about the business. Learn about the mission statements, the company values, their vision statements. Learn about its current clients, because they are going to be the users. How do they market their product? Who is their competition? What is their marketing strategy? What is their logo? What is their brand identity? Do they have current products? So the more we know about the business and their goals and values, the better we are able to develop a product for them. We also need to know a little bit more about the people we also need to know a little bit more about the members of the business. Who's on the marketing team, the management team, the sales team, the graphic design team. Usually you're going to be working with a lot of different people from a lot of different companies, and they're all going to have their own individual ideas on what's important and how to do things. So you need to understand their different roles and responsibilities so that you can create the best type of product. You need to start identifying what documents do they have, what other types of media do they have, who is in charge of that media, where is it. You might want to have some of these people on meetings, you might want to be sitting in on some of these meetings. After you develop the product, depending on the nature of the product, who's going to maintain it, how is success going to be measured. These are some of the things that we need to look at the strategy plane. The better we plan, the better the product will be for the user. I would just like to talk about brand versus logo. Okay, brand is what essentially is identifying the product, distinct from other sellers. Although, a logo does that also. But a brand involves more of an emotional perception of the company or the product that it comes from. The logo is more of the symbol that represents the company. So this concept of branding, all right, branding the product, it has to do with delivering a message. It also confirms our credibility, just saying who we are. And it connects the possible users emotionally, motivating them and kind of bringing in some kind of user loyalty. So this idea of branding. is something that you want to think about at this level. So here we have the Apple logo on this gorgeous building. We all recognize the Apple logo, but that is the logo, that isn't the brand. The brand is innovation, technology, ease of use, portability, mobility. A lot of different thoughts, feelings come in with the brand that the Apple Corporation has established in our society, which is a little bit more important than the logo. So here again, as you're developing your product for a company, you're also looking at how this is going to be branded. Alright, so let's talk about some examples here to get a better understanding of what we mean when we talk about goals and objectives. So supposing we said we need to provide a way for customers to track orders online. Alright, this is an objective for creating some kind of application, but it's not very specific. I mean, it's a good start. Alright, it's more general, but this is where I'm talking about where we start narrowing down things. Alright? And even before we start narrowing down things, remember, we always need to ask the question, why is this needed? If there's no real reason for doing it, do we really need to do it? Alright, saving customer service work. Very good reason. Obviously, it's going to save time and money. Bringing the customer back to the website. Hey, yeah, every time they come back, there's a chance they're creating more loyalty. They're remembering the URL. They're possibly going to order something again. Alright, getting back to this relatively fuzzy goal. Here's an example of more specific objectives. Alright, what we need to do is to provide the ability to deliver an email with tracking ID with a link to UPS. We've all probably received that from eBay, if we've ordered something on eBay. Alright, this is a way for customers to track orders. It's one way, okay, and it's via an email message. Another way might be to go onto the website, enter some kind of ID, and see details. Alright, we also might want to create a system to view past orders. So you're looking at a general objective, and now we're looking at ways of narrowing it down into specifics, because the more specific we can get, the more we know about what our job is going to be. Here's another example. We need a blog on the website, and this is more of an idea than a need. It might be a good idea, all right? But here again, getting back to knowing the problem before you create the solution gives you a better idea of what the solution can really be, and it's going to be a lot more effective. And we can tailor it better to the user. Alright, so why do we need this? And these are very good reasons. To appear relevant or in touch. Yeah, for appearances only, okay, that's fine. Keeping up with the rest of the social media applications. Okay, to get people to come to the site regularly, very good. Alright, another way to communicate. Okay, so if you look at focusing on needs, we can better start identifying the process and what we are actually building. The next few slides are going to center around the Google case study. There are actually 3 videos on the left-hand side of Blackboard, and they did the Google developers did a very nice job of actually setting up this scenario on going through the steps involved in developing this pizza ordering application for mobile devices. Alright, so in the first video they're talking about identifying the goals the business and product must deliver. So we're looking at business goals, and we're looking at the goals of the product that we're developing, which is the mobile application. Alright, so here again, getting back to the first question, why? Why build this? Is there a need? And what are our goals? Alright, so here again, we're brainstorming. Why are we building this? Alright, we're going to satisfy hungry people with pizza. Okay, that's a goal. Making ordering pizza easier. Yeah. Added value. Okay, they're also going to throw this in. We're going to be supporting local farmers and sustainability practices. Enable users to feel good. Alright, so the fourth goal is centered around users because they're going to be giving back to the community via the sustainability aspect of it and the local farmers. If these are our goals, which they're fine goals, you're entitled to any goals you want, this is where we start just realizing that this is what we're going to be building our application around. Our design, our choices of color, our choices of content, our choices of fonts, and we'll be learning about that later on in this course. This is where the whole design process is focused on the goals. It's just not text having that text goal on the page somewhere. It has the whole look and feel, and emotional voice and tone is going to be focused on these goals. And it's also going to be focused on the user, because this is our target audience. Alright, so here again, the more you can brainstorm at this strategy plane, better your products will be. Alright, so we're going to try to find the goals that we're going to be delivered, because here again, these goals are actually eventually going to be tied in to the features of the product. Alright, so what is important to people? Are dietary restrictions important? Are convenience in ordering and delivering important? Which is more important, quality or price? Is easiness in paying important? Alright, so by looking at these ideas, we can turn these ideas into goals, weave them into our product. People make decisions upon emotion. Very, very true. Okay, so here again, getting the goals, weaving the goals into the product and designing the features so that we are focusing on the user when they make decisions. So in our next feature, we're going to look at how we identify the users, how we create personas, and do use case scenarios.